Have you ever wondered why certain people seem to love you more through their unconscious gestures rather than through their words? Picture this scenario. You're at a restaurant with someone important to you, and while you're talking, you notice they unconsciously mirror your movements when you lean on the table. They do it too when you smile. Their face lights up. This isn't coincidence, according to Sigmund Freud. Our unconscious speaks a secret language far more honest than the words we utter true. Feelings hide in gestures, glances and behaviors that escape rational mind control. These invisible signals reveal repressed desires, deep attachments, and what Freud called object libido, psychic energy directed toward a specific person. Today, we'll discover together 6 hidden signals that reveal when someone truly loves you, even if they're not aware of it. These unconscious behaviors are wide-open windows into the human soul. If you want to continue exploring the secrets of human behavior, subscribe to the channel. The first signal we're about to unveil could forever change how you interpret relationships. The first invisible signal of love is called unconscious mirroring and represents one of the most powerful phenomena in relationship psychology. When someone feels deep emotions for you, their unconscious literally begins to mirror itself in your movements. It's not a conscious strategy, it's pure psychic energy, seeking connection. Imagine having dinner with a friend while you tell an exciting story. You notice that when you gesture, they also move their hands. When you tilt your head, theirs moves in the same direction. When you change position in your chair, they do the same. After a few seconds, this isn't chance. It's the unconscious speaking. Freud explained this phenomenon through the concept of primary identification. When we feel attachment to someone, our unconscious ego seeks to symbolically merge with the object of our affection. It's as if the psyche says, I want to be like you because I desire you, admire, you love you. Mirroring happens because the unconscious doesn't completely distinguish between self and other. When there's strong emotional attraction, it's a residue of infantile narcissism that Freud called narcissistic object choice. We love in others what we would like to be or what we recognize as part of ourselves, but careful, not all mirroring is equal. Authentic mirroring is subtle, natural, almost imperceptible. The person doesn't realize they're imitating you. It happens spontaneously. It's the unconscious moving, not the will. When you observe this behavior, you're witnessing a very deep psychic process. The other is unconsciously interjecting your presence into their mental space. They're literally absorbing you into their psychic structure. Authentic mirroring also manifests in language. The person starts using your expressions, unconsciously repeats your key words, adopts your conversation rhythm. It's as if their superego were gradually welcoming elements of your inner world. Freud maintained that this phenomenon reveals the presence of what he called object libido, psychic energy specifically invested in you. It's not simple sympathy, it's deep attachment, unconscious desire for union. Have you ever noticed someone who imitates you unconsciously, so naturally, it seems like a silent dance that's not chance? It's love speaking through the body before the mind becomes aware, unconscious. Mirroring is all the more significant, the more spontaneous and constant it is. Over time, once, twice could be coincidence, but when it becomes a recurring pattern, you're observing the unconscious in love. But this is only the first signal. The second is even more revealing and concerns something we all do every day without noticing. The second invisible signal of deep love is what Freud called protective projection, an unconscious defense mechanism that reveals intense attachment. When someone truly loves you, their unconscious perceives you as an extension of themselves. This means any threat, criticism, or attack directed toward you is unconsciously experienced as personal danger. Imagine this situation. You're at dinner with friends and someone makes a joke or slightly critical comment about you. You notice that a specific person in the group reacts immediately, almost instinctively, taking your defense, even when you yourself don't feel particularly offended. That immediate, almost automatic reaction is pure protective projection. Freud explained this phenomenon through the concept of projective identification. When we invest libidinal energy in someone, we unconsciously include them in our ideal ego. Defending them literally becomes defending a part of ourselves. The person who loves you deeply develops what we could call a psychic alert system toward you. Their unconscious constantly monitors the social environment, searching for potential threats to your image, your emotional well-being, your reputation. This mechanism also activates when you're not present. Have you ever heard that someone spoke well of you in your absence, defending you from criticism or misunderstandings? That's not just affection, it's protective projection in pure state. The phenomenon becomes even more interesting when the protection is disproportionate to the situation. The person reacts as if the attack were directed at them. This happens because the unconscious has created what Freud called total object investment. You've literally occupied a privileged space in their psychic structure, but careful, authentic protective projection is different from simple social courtesy. It's immediate, spontaneous, emotionally charged. The person doesn't reflect, they react. It's the unconscious speaking before reason. This mechanism also manifests in subtler forms. The person might interrupt conversations they consider harmful to your reputation, change the subject when they feel an unfavorable climate is being created toward you, or simply show physical discomfort when someone criticizes you. Freud maintained that this behavior reveals the presence of what he called secondary narcissism, the ability to love the other as if they were part of one's own ego. It's a signal of emotional maturity and depth of feeling. Protective projection is all the more significant, the more automatic and constant it is when someone defends you instinctively, without calculations or strategies. Their unconscious is communicating, "You are part of me, and I protect what I love." Have you ever observed someone react disproportionately when someone else criticized you? That wasn't simple solidarity. It was the unconscious in love, manifesting through protective instinct. But there's a third signal, even more subtle and revealing, that concerns how our body betrays the deepest feelings. The third invisible signal of deep love is literally written in the eye's unconscious pupil dilation when they look at you. This phenomenon particularly fascinated Freud, who considered it one of the most evident proofs of how the unconscious controls the body without the rational mind being able to interfere. Imagine talking with someone in a well-lit room. Suddenly you notice their pupils dilate slightly when they look at you, even though the light hasn't changed. What you're observing is pure physiology of attraction, the unconscious speaking through the autonomic nervous system. Freud explained this phenomenon by connecting it to scopic libido, the unconscious desire to visually possess the object of our love. When we feel deep attraction, the unconscious literally opens the eyes to absorb as much image as possible of the beloved person. Pupil dilation is controlled by the sympathetic nervous system, that part of the brain that manages automatic body reactions. When we see something we intensely desire, consciously or unconsciously, pupils dilate to capture more light and details. But there's more. Freud connected this phenomenon to the concept of visual libidinal investment. The eyes literally become instruments of emotional possession. The person who loves you unconsciously devours your image, seeks to imprint it deeply in memory. This signal is particularly reliable because it's impossible to consciously falsify. You can control your words, your gestures, even your facial expressions, but you can't command your pupils to dilate or constrict. Pupil dilation often accompanies other microsignals. The gaze lingers a few milliseconds longer on your face. Eyes unconsciously follow your movements. There's a different quality in the intensity of the gaze. Freud maintained that this behavior revealed the presence of what he called visual appropriation drive. The unconscious seeks to capture and retain the image of the beloved object through intensification of visual perception. Interesting is also the timing. Pupil dilation occurs in moments of greatest emotional intensity of conversation when talking about personal topics, when there's prolonged eye contact. But careful, this phenomenon must be observed in context. Pupil dilation can also indicate other intense emotions: surprise, fear, general excitement. What makes the signal significant is its specific recurrence when the person looks at you. The phenomenon is even more pronounced when combined with what Freud called prolonged unconscious gaze, that tendency to look at you a few seconds longer than normal, as if the unconscious resisted the idea of looking away from you. Have you ever noticed someone who looked at you with particular intensity, as if they were trying to memorize every detail of your face, and maybe you intuited a different quality in that gaze, a depth that went beyond simple social attention, that wasn't casualness? It was the eyes of the unconscious in love, speaking a language that words cannot express. But the fourth signal is even more subtle and concerns something we all do without noticing. The fourth invisible signal of deep love is what Freud defined as affective selective memory, the unconscious ability to remember every small detail concerning you. When someone truly loves you, their unconscious transforms every piece of information about you into precious material to preserve. It's as if you had occupied a privileged space in their mental filing system. Imagine this scene during a casual conversation. You mentioned almost in passing that as a child you were afraid of thunderstorms. Weeks later, during a rainy afternoon, that person spontaneously writes to ask if you're okay, perfectly remembering that apparently insignificant detail. Freud explained this phenomenon through the concept of libidinal investment of memory. When we feel deep love for someone, the unconscious invests psychic energy not only on the present person, but on everything concerning them: memories, stories, preferences, fears. Affective selective memory functions like an ultra-efficient unconscious cataloging system. The person remembers your favorite movie mentioned 3 months ago, your childhood story told during dinner, how you take coffee, even casual comments about your musical tastes. This happens because the unconscious in love considers every piece of information about you as a piece of an emotional puzzle it wants to complete. It's what Freud called construction of the total love object, the unconscious desire to know and mentally possess every aspect of the beloved person. But there's a particular characteristic. This memory is not only precise, it's also emotionally charged. The person doesn't just remember facts, they remember the atmosphere, emotions, the context in which you shared that information. The phenomenon also manifests through what we could call anticipation of needs. The person remembers you don't like fish and always orders restaurants with alternatives, remembers you're afraid of flying, and spontaneously writes when they know you have a plane trip. Freud maintained that this hyper-attention to details revealed the presence of what he called object completion, drive the unconscious desire to create a complete and perfect mental image of the love object. Affective selective memory is particularly significant when it concerns emotional details. The person remembers not only what you said, but how you felt when you said it. They remember your worries, your dreams, your hidden insecurities. This signal is different from simple good social memory. It's selective. The person might completely forget details of other conversations, but perfectly remembers every nuance of your interactions. The phenomenon becomes even more evident when the person uses these memories to make you feel special. They bring you the book you talked about months ago. Organize something they intuited you would like. Avoid topics they know make you uncomfortable. Freud connected this behavior to the unconscious pleasure principle, the impulse of the ego to create situations that provide satisfaction to the love object, even when this involves personal effort or sacrifice. Have you ever noticed someone who remembered details about you that you yourself had forgotten, sharing that wasn't just attention? It was the unconscious that had transformed every word of yours into emotional treasure to guard. But the fifth signal is even deeper. and concerns how the unconscious betrays feelings through body language. The fifth invisible signal of deep love is what Freud called unconscious body orientation, the automatic tendency of the body to turn toward the beloved person. Even in group situations, when someone feels deep feelings for you, their unconscious literally magnetizes the body in your direction, creating what we could define as an invisible energy axis. Imagine being at a party with many people. You observe the room and notice that a specific person, even when talking with others, unconsciously keeps their feet pointed toward you when they laugh. Their body turns slightly in your direction. When they gesture, their hands seem to unconsciously indicate your space. What you're observing is pure language of the unconscious in love. Freud explained this phenomenon through the concept of gravitational libido, psychic energy that creates a field of unconscious attraction toward the object of desire. It's as if the unconscious transformed the beloved person into an emotional magnetic pole. Unconscious body orientation manifests in different ways. The body leans slightly toward you during conversations, even at distance, shoulders open. When you're in the visual field, the torso orients in your direction, even when the person is technically talking with someone else. This behavior revealed, according to Freud, the presence of what he called spatial approach, drive the unconscious desire to reduce physical and psychological distance with the love object. But there's an even more subtle aspect. Even when the person can't look at you directly, their body maintains an orientation that includes your space. It's as if the unconscious created an invisible physical connection. The phenomenon is particularly evident in complex social situations. While conversing with others, the person unconsciously maintains a posture that allows them to perceive your presence without having to turn their head completely. Freud connected this behavior to the concept of affective territoriality, the unconscious that considers your space as emotionally relevant and seeks to maintain a symbolic physical connection. Unconscious body orientation also includes micro-movements. When you move in a room, the person tends to subtly reorient their position. When you get up, their body shows muscle tension, as if unconsciously preparing to follow you. This signal is particularly reliable because it's almost impossible to consciously control. For long periods, you can decide to look elsewhere, but the body always betrays the orientation of unconscious attention. The phenomenon intensifies during moments of greatest emotional charge, when you laugh, when you talk about important topics, when you show vulnerability in those moments. Body orientation becomes even more pronounced. Freud maintained that this behavior revealed the presence of what he called symbolic physical union instinct, the unconscious desire to create spatial continuity with the love object. But there's also a protective aspect. The person unconsciously positions themselves to be able to intervene quickly if you should need support. It's as if the body created an invisible emotional guard. Have you ever noticed someone who always seemed oriented toward you, even when they were busy with other people? That wasn't coincidence. It was the unconscious that had transformed your space into an emotional gravitational center. But the last signal is the deepest of all and concerns something that happens in silence. The sixth and final invisible signal of deep love is what Freud considered the most revealing: the ability to share comfortable silence without social anxiety. When someone truly loves you, their unconscious doesn't perceive moments of silence as voids to fill, but as spaces of authentic intimacy to savor. Imagine this scene: you're sitting with someone, maybe after a long conversation. The dialogue naturally fades, and instead of feeling the nervous impulse to say something, you both simply remain present. You notice the other person shows no signs of discomfort. On the contrary, they seem relaxed, even happy about this shared silence. Freud explained this phenomenon through the concept of temporary fusion of egos. When we feel deep love, the unconscious creates a shared psychic space where the need for social performance disappears. Comfortable silence is different from simple social quiet. It's charged with presence, with subtle connection with what Freud called direct unconscious communication, an energy exchange that happens below the threshold of verbal language. This signal is particularly significant because in most social relationships, silence creates anxiety. The unconscious interprets it as disconnection, communicative failure, threat to social bond. But when there's authentic love, silence becomes emotional nourishment. The person who loves you deeply doesn't feel the need to constantly entertain you. Their unconscious has developed what Freud called trust in bond, permanence, unconscious security. That connection exists independently of words. The phenomenon also manifests through subtle synchronizations. You breathe at the same rhythm, your movements harmonize. There's an almost meditative quality in sharing silent space. Freud maintained that comfortable silence revealed the presence of what he called mature object love, the ability to love the other for what they are not, for what they say or do to entertain us. But there's an even deeper aspect during these silences. The person looks at you with what we could define as contemplative gaze. They're not studying or judging you, they're simply drinking you with their eyes, enjoying your presence. This type of silence is also regenerative. Instead of draining energy like social anxiety, it nourishes it. It's as if the unconscious had found a source of peace in your presence. Comfortable silence is particularly evident in transition moments, when you finish eating and remain seated without hurry, when you watch a sunset together without feeling the need to comment, when you find yourselves in the same space and your silent coexistence seems completely natural. Freud connected this phenomenon to the concept of positive regression, the ability of the unconscious to return to states of primordial intimacy, similar to symbiotic fusion between mother and child, but mature and aware. The person who shares comfortable silence with you is unconsciously communicating. Your presence is sufficient. You don't have to do anything to be loved. You are perfect as you are in this moment. Have you ever experienced moments of silence so natural and nourishing they seemed more communicative than many conversations that wasn't just relaxation, it was the unconscious that had created a sacred space of pure love? These aren't psychological tricks, but authentic windows into the human unconscious. They are signals that no one can fake for long, because they arise from the depths of the psyche, from that libidinal energy that Freud identified as the most powerful force of human experience. The next time you interact with someone important, observe with new eyes. Authentic love always speaks, but it does so in a language that only the unconscious knows perfectly. The final question I leave you is this: now that you know these signals, are you ready to recognize the love that perhaps someone is already showing you without words? What city are you watching this from? Comment down below. I'm curious to know where in the world these discoveries about the human unconscious are traveling.